Our friend and colleague Jim Jordan is a patriot. He is an America First warrior who wins the toughest of fights, going after corruption and delivering accountability at the highest levels of government on behalf of we, the people. Jim is the voice of the American people who have felt voiceless for far too long.
Welcome back to America Decides. Despite those words from the chair of the House Republican Conference, Elise Stefanik, on the House floor, Jim Jordan failed to clinch the Speaker's gavel Tuesday. Joel Payne and Maura Gillespie join us now. Joel is a CBS News political contributor and Democratic strategist, as well as chief communications officer for Move On. And Maura is a former advisor to Speaker John Boehner and former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger. She is also the founder of Blue Stack Strategies. What does Jim Jordan need to do at this point to lock up the votes, or is his candidacy in jeopardy the longer this drags on?
The fact that Jim Jordan even got 200 votes to me is pretty shocking and quite frankly sad for the state of the Congress. You know, Jim Jordan is not somebody who should be Speaker of the House. The Speaker of the House is somebody who needs to be not only representative of the party that's a majority, but also who can look out for the integrity of the institution. And that's not Jim Jordan. So I think those who have held firm, those 2021, perhaps there are a couple that will flip, but I don't see him getting there. And so I think there needs to be a new plan moving forward that does not include Jim Jordan at the helm.
What could that new plan be?
Well, I think, they've discussed giving Patrick McHenry some additional powers during this time where he's pro tem, so it could get things done. Because again, 1 month from now is when the government shutdown is slated to happen. So you really do need to think about the appropriations bills that need to happen and need to get across to the Senate and to the president's desk. So we really do need to start moving forward on things. And this delay and this putting up Jim Jordan is not going to get us there.
And Joel, I want to turn to you. I mean, we spoke earlier in the program with Minority Whip Catherine Clark. She continued to echo calls for bipartisanship. We have heard Democrats talk about this potential bipartisan governing coalition that they would like to see. I mean, is that even feasible at this point, given the dynamics in the House?
I mean, anything should be feasible to make sure that the work of the American people can go forward. And the Democratic leadership has been pretty united in that messaging that they're willing to do that. It's interesting to me. I've been obviously watching this with, I'm a partisan, so some glee. And I guess the political reality that kind of washes upon me is that not only is this bad for Jim Jordan, but it's bad for a number of members of his caucus. You've got about a dozen of those Republicans who are in these Biden districts that President Biden won in 2020 that are represented by Republicans. They had to vote for Jim Jordan today. Now, if Jim Jordan wins, I suppose that there's going to be some sort of coalescing around a message defending that. If he loses, those folks have taken a really bad vote on Jim Jordan, who has allegations of mishandling sexual assault allegations, who has obviously someone who voted with insurrectionists on January 6th, somebody who has pretty extreme positions on things like abortion. That's not a good vote if you're David Valadao. That's not a good vote if you are one of these other 12 Republicans in these Biden districts. So that also is not lost upon me as well.
And Maura, I guess just to piggyback on Joel's point here, I mean, how do you think this plays out politically for Republicans next year?
It's going to be a real challenge for those who did vote today for him. They're going to have to answer to that because, again, Jim Jordan has not shown any real willingness to be bipartisan and has not shown to really rise to the occasion. Again, the Speaker of the House is third in line of the presidency. This is not just, leading the party. This is leading the whole House and working on behalf of the whole House. And so his record does not show us that he is eager to work bipartisan. His record shows us that he has voted against certifying the election and took an integral role during January 6th and speaking with the former President Trump and encouraging him to, or encouraging Pence to do something illegal. There's real implications there that need to be addressed. And for those who voted for him today, they're going to have to answer for that. I will say, and just maybe a little bit, I am glad that he wore a jacket on the House floor today. But again, that doesn't necessarily make him Speaker material.
And Joel, I want to turn back to you. Kevin McCarthy, the former speaker, has said in terms of the Democrats who voted with those 8 Republicans to boot him out of the job, that this was a political decision by Democrats. I mean, was this just an attempt to get the majority back in 2024?
I think Democrats voted their conscience. They voted in unison for someone they believed in. And I think it's kind of, pretty high folly for Kevin McCarthy to look to Democrats to bail him out because he could not keep any type of comedy within the Republican caucus. And I know that's a line that a lot of Republicans, particularly some kind of Republicans in leadership, have been pushing, but I just don't think that passes the smell test. Also, in this moment, I think Republicans also have to account for this. We're in the midst of two significant international conflicts in Israel and the Palestinian territories, and then also in the Ukraine. We've got a government shutdown bearing down on us inside of another 5 to 6 weeks, and they're having a hard time figuring out who is going to be at the head of the House of Representatives to help be a part of that solution. That does not speak well for governance. By the way, that's something that you're going to hear a lot about going into 2024 as you see this split screen between Biden's America and between kind of the Trump MAGA vision of America. I think that what you've seen over the last few weeks in the Republican House plays very much into that.
And Maura, how does the Republican Party move forward from this whenever a new speaker is elected?
It'll be really important for Republicans to kind of figure out who they want to be. Right now, they are very disorganized. They are very individual, really focusing on themselves and not as a team. And it is funny to me to hear people in the Jordan camp say, that now's the time to really unify. Well, you decided to throw the bombs in here in the first place, and now because you have your candidate that you wanted, that just to me is hysterical. But unfortunately, I think it'll be time for Republicans to recognize if they want to win or not.
All right, Maura Gillespie, Joel Payne, thank you as always for being with us.